I never thought I'd have to defend my right to raise my own child in court. But here I was sitting in a stark courtroom, watching my mother-in-law's expensive lawyer paint me as an unfit mother while my 8-year-old son, Oliver, squeezed my hand under the table. The past year had been brutal enough without this. Losing Mike in the construction accident had left a void in our lives that nothing could fill. Some mornings I still reached for him in bed, forgetting for just a moment that he was gone. But I had to keep going for Oliver. I threw myself into my work as a nurse, picking up extra shifts to ensure we'd be okay financially. It wasn't ideal, but we were managing. Oliver was resilient, just like his father. Your Honor, Margaret Sullivan's lawyer droned on, his voice dripping with rehearsed concern. Mrs. Thompson works night shifts 4 times a week, leaving her young son alone with various babysitters. The child's grandmother has documented multiple instances of concerning behavior. I felt my face flush. Those various babysitters were either my best friend Lisa, who'd been in Oliver's life since birth, or Mrs. Chen from next door, who'd been like a grandmother to him for years. And the concerning behavior they documented: Oliver's perfectly normal grief over losing his father. Margaret, my mother-in-law, sat across the courtroom, her steel-gray hair perfectly coiffed, her expression a masterpiece of performative concern. She'd never approved of me, the nurse who'd trapped her precious son into marriage. Now, 6 months after Mike's death, she decided I was unfit to raise her only grandchild. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, the child is frequently late to school, often appears tired in class, and his grades have slipped significantly in the past semester. I wanted to scream that, of course, Oliver's grades had slipped, he'd lost his father. Instead, I gripped my own lawyer's notepad, where I'd written down all the times Margaret had rejected our attempts to visit, all the therapy sessions she called unnecessary coddling, all the times she criticized my parenting choices. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, listened intently as Margaret's lawyer presented photo after photo. Oliver looking tired at school, taken the week after the funeral, dishes in our sink, from the morning I'd had to rush him to the ER with a fever, his unmade bed, cherry-picked from the day we'd overslept after staying up late working on his science project. Your Honor, Margaret's lawyer's voice rose dramatically. Mrs. Thompson's work schedule is clearly detrimental to the child's well-being. The boy needs stability, routine, and most importantly, he needs a present caregiver. Mrs. Sullivan can provide that. She's financially stable, has a suitable home, and most importantly, she can be there for Oliver full-time. I felt Oliver's hand tighten around mine. Looking down, I saw silent tears rolling down his cheeks. My heart shattered all over again. It's okay, baby, I whispered, though nothing about this was okay. Mrs. Thompson, the judge spoke for the first time, her voice neutral but not unkind. Would you like to respond to these allegations? I stood on shaky legs, my lawyer's reassuring pat on my shoulder doing little to steady my nerves. Your Honor, I want to speak. Oliver's clear voice cut through the courtroom. Everyone turned to look at him, including the judge. Oliver, honey, I started, but he was already standing, his small shoulders squared with determination. Young man, the judge leaned forward slightly, you understand this is a very serious proceeding. Yes, ma'am, Oliver replied, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. And I understand it's about me, so I should get to tell you the truth. The judge studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well, please approach the bench. Oliver walked forward, his Spider-Man sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. He looked tiny standing before the judge's bench, but his voice didn't waver. My dad died 189 days ago, he began. I know because I keep track in my journal. Mom got it for me after my first therapy session. She said it's okay to write down how I feel, even when the feelings are really big and scary. I saw Margaret shift uncomfortably in her seat. She called the therapy sessions a waste of money. Mom works at night sometimes, Oliver continued, but she never leaves me alone. Usually, it's Aunt Lisa who stays with me. She helps me with my homework and makes sure I eat my vegetables, even though I hate them. Or it's Mrs. Chen from next door. She teaches me Chinese words and tells me stories about when she was a little girl in Shanghai. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I wrote down all the things Mom does for me because Grandma said she's not there enough. Can I read it? The judge nodded, and Oliver unfolded his list. Mom makes my lunch every day, even when she's really tired. She puts little notes in it with jokes or drawings. She comes to all my soccer games, even if she just finished working. She helps me with my science projects. We're building a solar system model right now. When I have bad dreams about Dad, she sits with me and we look at old photos and tell stories about him. His voice caught slightly, but he pressed on. Sometimes I get sad because I miss Dad so much it hurts. Mom says that's normal, and we can be sad together. But she also makes sure we remember the happy things. We have Taco Tuesday because that was Dad's favorite, and every Saturday we do something fun that Dad would have liked. I couldn't stop my own tears now. Across the courtroom, I saw several people dabbing at their eyes. Margaret's expression remained stone-faced. Mom works hard because she wants me to have a good life, just like Dad would have wanted. And Oliver's voice finally cracked. I don't want to live with Grandma. She doesn't let me talk about Dad because she says it's dwelling on the past. She thinks therapy is stupid. She doesn't understand that sometimes you need to be sad before you can be happy again. The courtroom was absolutely silent as Oliver finished speaking. The judge looked at him thoughtfully, then asked, "Is there anything else you'd like to say, young man?" Oliver nodded, turning to look directly at his grandmother. "I love you, Grandma, but I want to stay with my mom. She's not perfect, but she's exactly what I need." The silence that followed Oliver's speech was deafening. I watched as the judge removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly while appearing deep in thought. My mother-in-law's lawyer shuffled his expensive papers uncomfortably, clearly thrown off script by my 8-year-old's heartfelt testimony. "Your Honor," Margaret finally spoke up, her voice trembling with what I recognized as barely controlled anger. Clearly the child has been coached. This emotional manipulation. "Mrs. Sullivan." The judge cut her off sharply. "Are you suggesting this young man is lying?" Margaret's face flushed. "No, of course not, but children can be influenced. Sarah has had months to." "I'd like to take a brief recess," the judge announced, cutting through Margaret's accusations. "When we return, Mrs. Sullivan, you'll have your chance to testify. Court will resume in 15 minutes. In the courthouse hallway, I hugged Oliver tightly. "You were so brave in there, baby." "Did I do okay, Mom?" he whispered against my shoulder. "I was really nervous." "You did perfectly," my lawyer, David Martinez, assured him. "You spoke from the heart, and that's exactly what the judge needed to hear." Lisa, who'd been sitting in the gallery, approached with Oliver's favorite juice box and a small package of cookies. "Here you go, buddy. I think you earned these." As Oliver settled onto a bench with his snack, I noticed Margaret watching us from across the hallway. Her perfectly manicured hands were clenched around her designer handbag, knuckles white with tension. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something flicker across her face. Was it doubt? Regret? But then her lawyer touched her elbow, and her expression hardened once again. Back in the courtroom, Margaret took the stand. Gone was the commanding presence she usually exhibited at family gatherings. Instead, she'd adopted a grandmother's worried tremor in her voice, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "I just want what's best for my grandson," she began. "Since Michael's death, I've watched Sarah spiral. The late nights, the irregular schedule, the parade of caretakers. Oliver needs stability. He needs family." "And you don't consider Mrs. Thompson family?" the judge inquired. "She's the mother of my grandchild," Margaret replied stiffly. "But she's never truly understood our family's values. Michael was supposed to join the family business, but she encouraged him to stay in construction because it made him happy." The disdain in her voice was palpable. My lawyer stood. "Mrs. Sullivan, could you explain what you mean by family values?" "Proper education, proper upbringing, proper connections," Margaret listed off. "Oliver should be attending Brightwood Academy, not that public school. He should be taking piano lessons, not playing soccer in the dirt. He should be being a child." David interrupted. "Mrs. Sullivan, are you aware that Oliver's current school has an excellent gifted program, which he's part of?" Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "A public school program can hardly compare to." "And are you aware," David continued, pulling out a document, "that Oliver's therapy sessions, which you've criticized, were actually recommended by his school counselor after noticing his mature handling of grief?" "Therapy is a crutch," Margaret snapped, her carefully constructed facade cracking. "In my day, we dealt with loss privately, with dignity. Not all this endless talking and feeling." Like you dealt with Michael's death? David asked quietly. The courtroom grew still. Margaret's face paled. Objection, her lawyer called out. Relevance? I'll allow it, the judge said, leaning forward with interest. Mrs. Sullivan, David continued, isn't it true that you haven't visited Michael's grave since the funeral? That you've packed away every photo of him in your house? That you've refused to participate in any of the grief counseling sessions the family was offered? I don't see how this is relevant, Margaret stammered. It's relevant because while you've been criticizing Sarah's parenting, she's been helping Oliver process his grief in healthy ways. While you've been taking photos of unwashed dishes to build a case, she's been working nights so she can attend Oliver's therapy sessions during the day. While you've been judging their living situation, she's been creating a home where Oliver feels safe expressing his feelings about losing his father. I watched as Margaret's composure completely crumbled. The carefully maintained mask of the concerned grandmother fell away, revealing the raw pain underneath. He was my son, she whispered, her voice breaking. My only child. And she got to spend his last years with him. She got his love, his time, she couldn't continue. The judge's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Sullivan, it sounds to me like this case isn't really about Oliver's well-being at all. Is it? Margaret stared down at her hands. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked her age, not the formidable matriarch, but a grieving mother who didn't know how to process her loss. She struggled to find the words. I look at Oliver, and I see Michael. His smile, his eyes, the way he scrunches his nose when he's thinking hard about something. And when he's with Sarah, living this life so different from what I'd imagined for Michael, it feels like losing him all over again. I felt tears rolling down my own cheeks. Beside me, Oliver slipped his small hand into mine again, squeezing gently. Despite everything Margaret had put us through, in that moment, I understood her pain. She wasn't just fighting for custody of Oliver, she was fighting to hold onto the last piece of her son, the last chance to feel connected to him. The judge called a second recess after Margaret's emotional testimony. As the courtroom cleared, I watched my mother-in-law sitting alone on a bench, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Oliver tugged at my sleeve. Mom, can I go talk to Grandma? I hesitated, but the look in his eyes, so much like his father's, made me nod. Okay, baby, I'll be right here. Oliver walked over to Margaret, who looked up, startled, as he approached. Even from where I stood, I could see her hands trembling as she reached out to him. I miss Dad too, I heard him say simply. Sometimes when I'm really sad, Mom, and I look at old videos. We have one where Dad's teaching me to ride a bike, and you're in it too, Grandma. You're holding the camera and laughing because Dad keeps running into the bushes with me. Margaret covered her mouth with one hand, tears spilling freely now. I remember that day, she whispered. He was so determined to teach you himself, even though he could barely ride a bike. Mom says it's okay to laugh about happy memories even when we're sad, Oliver continued. Maybe you could watch the videos with us sometime. Before Margaret could respond, we were called back into the courtroom. The judge sat straight in her chair, surveying the room before speaking. This case, she began, came before me as a custody dispute. What I've witnessed instead is a family in pain, struggling to heal from a devastating loss. She turned to Margaret. Mrs. Sullivan, your love for your grandson is evident. Your grief for your son is palpable. But grief cannot be allowed to masquerade as concern for child welfare. Margaret nodded slightly, dabbing at her eyes. The evidence presented against Mrs. Thompson amounts to nothing more than normal challenges faced by a working single mother. The photos, the school records, even the testimony about her work schedule, none of it suggests neglect or unfitness. What they do show is a mother doing her absolute best in difficult circumstances. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Thompson, the court recognizes your efforts to maintain stability for your son while allowing him space to grieve. The support system you've built, your friend Lisa, your neighbor Mrs. Chen, the therapy sessions, these demonstrate thoughtful, intentional parenting. She folded her hands on the bench. However, I believe Oliver would benefit from having his grandmother in his life, not as a replacement for his mother, but as an additional source of love and support. My heart skipped a beat as the judge continued. Therefore, my ruling is as follows. Full custody will remain with Mrs. Thompson. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. However, I'm ordering both Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Sullivan to attend family counseling sessions together, with the goal of establishing healthy boundaries and communication for Oliver's benefit. Margaret's lawyer started to object, but Margaret herself raised a hand to stop him. She was looking at Oliver, who had broken into a wide smile. Furthermore, the judge added, I'm recommending a gradual visitation schedule to be determined through mediation, allowing Mrs. Sullivan regular time with her grandson while respecting the primary household's routine. After the judge adjourned the court, I found myself standing face to face with Margaret in the hallway. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I'm sorry, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was fighting for Michael, but I was really just fighting against my own grief. I know, I replied softly, and I understand. Oliver needs his grandmother, Margaret. He needs your stories about Michael, your memories. But he needs them shared with love, not used as weapons. She nodded, then looked down at Oliver, who stood between us. Would you really be willing to watch those videos with me? We have pizza and movie night every Friday, Oliver said. Mom makes Dad's favorite, pepperoni with extra cheese. You could come this week if you want. Margaret's eyes met mine questioning. I managed a small smile. Friday at 6. Don't be late. Oliver's very serious about his pizza schedule. 3 months later, I sat on my couch watching Margaret and Oliver hunch over his science project, a detailed model of the solar system. She was helping him paint Neptune while telling him about how Michael had once tried to convince her that Pluto's demotion from planet status was a government conspiracy. Your dad loved space, she said, carefully adding another streak of blue. He used to say the most wonderful thing about the universe is that there's always more to discover. Just like with memories of Dad, Oliver replied thoughtfully, there's always more stories to learn about him. Margaret caught my eye across the room, and we shared a moment of understanding. We were both learning about grief, about healing, about finding new ways to keep Michael's memory alive. It wasn't always easy, and some days the pain felt as fresh as ever. But we were doing it together now, not as adversaries, but as family. Maybe that's what Michael would have wanted all along.